We're going to move on to the second strategy, and that is cultivating the right teams. I'm going to pass it on to Samantha.
So as far as cultivating the right teams, y'all, it's really important to think about your teams in three different buckets. So you'll have your project team, which is the district leads. And these folks will provide general project oversight, co-manage planning, logistics, and communications, and they'll make and communicate decisions on guardrails. But then you'll want to expand this out to a steering committee, which they'll be able to provide input and feedback to the project team. Like I said, it's really important that everyone is talking to each other, right? That they'll be able to lead engagement activities, participate in the creation of strategic direction. So maybe it's realigning on mission, vision, values, and focus areas, because perhaps if you just have a few people doing this, then the whole community is not involved. So it's important to get more voices in the circle. And another option for steering committee is that they'll be able to lead and participate in the planning team meetings, of course, if they have time to do so, and then share their learnings back to the rest of the steering committee. And finally, you'll want to then create planning teams, and planning teams should be dispersed. Our project and steering committee should be dispersed throughout planning teams to make sure that there are lead voices in there, and they'll be able to solicit feedback from stakeholders and represent stakeholder voice, provide input and feedback on key decisions, outline and execute on the work of the strategic plan, and engage other teams as necessary. For example, grade level teams. There was a comment in the chat about like creating educator confidence and capacity. And I was like, that would be great. Like you'll want to be able to involve educator voices so that they feel part of the conversation, right? And part of the decision making. And of course you want to have your project team leading some of these decisions, but that the decision should really be made by the school community.
Just want to frame what Samantha shared as kind of the year zero. And so if you're thinking about renewing your strategic plan or writing a new plan, this is the teaming structure that we have found time and time again has worked for districts in terms of actually putting together a strategic plan. And usually that process takes anywhere from 4 or 5 months up to a school year. And that's what we usually call year zero. And so this is an example of some real life work that we're doing with a district. And so one of the districts that we're working with is just now embarking on the first year of implementation. They just finished their strategic plan. They're about to publish it. They're about to unveil it to their community. And this is the last school year. And this school year is the first year of implementation. And so as you're thinking about building buy-in and ensuring representation from different constituent groups across the community, you want to still think about these structures of a project team, a steering team that really measures impact and ensures that all of the work is aligned to the vision, that supports with stakeholder engagement, that monitors the metrics that you're putting together. But then also thinking about implementation teams. The way that we've seen it work usually is if you have 4 pillars or if you have 4 focus areas, you probably want to have 4 implementation teams, 3 to 3, 1 to 1, etc. Initiatives and strategies, process management, communicating updates. And it is a very, not to use a buzzy word, I hate to use a buzzy word, but it is a very, synergetic process. We really like to see the implementation teams have representation from the steering team, that the project teams members sit on implementation teams as well, and that all of these different groups, like Samantha was saying, are talking to each other. On the right, you'll see another example of a similar teaming structure, and this is a district that one of their focus areas is this idea of shared decision making. And so some of the ideas that some of the initiatives aligned to that pillar include administering a climate survey and analyzing data from the climate survey. It includes putting together a DEI, a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and allowing that committee to come up with projects and ideas that will impact the entire district. One of the really cool things that they came up with, this idea of a decision-making protocol flowchart, so that everybody in the district understands how district leaders and the board members get to specific decisions and how decisions are made, to build transparency and visibility into that process. And then thinking about another example was this idea of a responsive leadership series that they want to develop and administer to their school leaders and their district leaders. And so you can also think about, you can think about this implementation on the left, a similar structure to what we've shared in a few slides previously, or you can think about different subcommittees that are actively working towards different initiatives or different projects that are aligned to a particular pillar. One of the districts that we're supporting with, a couple of their pillars are centered around the student experience. And so thinking about, building real world experiences for students, upping student engagement. And so one thing that we saw in the past and historically in this district is that there is a lack of staff buy-in. So the community is very bought in, the district admin and the school leaders are very bought in, but there is a kind of a hindrance when it comes to staff and educators and teachers being bought into some of these initiatives. And so one of the things that we really encourage this district to do is to think about how can you cultivate your teams from within your staff? How can you bring this work directly into schools and have your school leaders and principals be the ambassadors of this work? Because your school leaders are bought in, but how can you cultivate and amass your ranks in these implementation teams from within your staff? And so that's something that that district is currently working on to a lot of success. And that is attributed to this idea of, we see that staff is not bought in. Historically, they have not been bought in. We gathered their feedback. There are some things that some of these ideas are direct responses to the feedback that we gathered from staff and teachers. It's not the district leader's job. It's not the parents and the community members that are sitting on these teams to bring this to life, just them. We also want representation from the educators and the teachers in the buildings. And so that's one way that you can really build buy-in from the staff.